Eva Green is who I consider to be the best representation of moral ambiguity in modern-day antagonists. And I say this not because she's been my celebrity crush since I was 13 years old, and I had my Megan Fox and Transformers moment when I watched Rise of an Empire for the first time. It's because across her entire filmography, she's always adopted a type of character whose actions often come into conflict with the image she presents, in the sense that there's always something lingering in the background, as if she's laid out a set of backup plans that still achieve her agenda if plan A doesn't work. And I've noticed that even when she's not fully embracing villainy or morally gray characters, fragments of that energy are still there. There's always the feeling that if things don't go her way, she could easily take matters into her own hands. Some might call that a flaw, but honestly, I think it's a valid attempt at trying new things and evolving as an actress. People often mistake my takes on popular actors trying roles outside of their lane as me bashing the attempt itself, but that's not the case at all. My main issue is when they adopt that new archetype and frame it as an extension of themselves or their usual character, because they think audiences are just showing up for them. Eva Green doesn't do that. From the very start of her career, she's carried this unnerving intensity, the kind that makes even neutral characters feel dangerous and outright villains feel mythic. Hollywood keeps trying to soften her edges, frame her as a love interest, a tragic muse, a gothic fantasy figure. But every time, the same thing happens. The moment she's given even a sliver of moral darkness, that part of her takes over. She can't help but contaminate everything with menace. Her stillness feels predatory. Her eye contact feels confrontational. Even silence reads as intent. She's an actress who understands power, control, and psychological dominance better than any actress I've seen outside Blanchett. And nowhere is that clearer than in the roles where she's allowed or required to be the antagonist. I'm not going to lie, this is probably going to sound more like a puff piece than a retrospective, so I'll try to substantiate my points as best as I can. Let's get started with inarguably her biggest role in a major blockbuster. Set parallel to and immediately after the events of 300, the best Zack Snyder film to date, Rise of an Empire reframes the Greco-Persian War as a naval bloodbath, with the Athenian general Themistocles trying to unify Greece against Xerxes' expanding empire. Eva Green's Artemisia is the emotional and strategic engine of the film. A Greek-born woman brutalized by her own people and rebuilt by Persia, Artemisia begins the story as a weapon forged by trauma, using intellect, seduction, and overwhelming violence to dismantle Greek resistance. Her arc is one of escalation rather than redemption. She moves from calculated commander to almost mythic embodiment of vengeance, pushing herself closer to annihilation with every decision. By the final act, the war becomes personal, culminating in a confrontation where her need for domination finally consumes her.
Today we will dance across the backs of dead Greeks.
The film positions Artemisia as both architect and casualty of the conflict, a character who wins every battle except the one against herself. Artemisia is a thesis statement for Eva Green's screen presence. This is a film built entirely on hypermasculine bombast and blood-soaked spectacle. Green walks in and completely destabilizes it. While every other character is shouting about honor, destiny, and war, Green plays her like someone who has outgrown ideology. All she believes in is leverage. Her seduction scenes are purely transactional, and if not, they're just humiliating. She dares men to keep up, knowing they won't. Artemisia becomes a villain defined not by cruelty, but by competence. Tim Burton's Dark Shadows is a gothic soap opera wrapped in camp, following the cursed vampire Barnabas Collins as he awakens in 1970s America and returns to a decaying family empire. Eva Green's Angelique Bouchard is the story's true antagonist, a witch whose obsessive love for Barnabas mutates into centuries-long revenge when he rejects her. Her progression is driven by fixation. She begins as a spurned servant wielding newfound power, then evolves into a corporate magnate who has methodically dismantled the Collins family line while waiting for Barnabas to rise again. As the story unfolds, her desire curdles into control.
No one talks like you anymore, Barnabas.
She no longer wants Barnabas dead, she wants him owned. By the climax, Angelique sheds any pretense of romance, embracing destruction as the only way to resolve her obsession. Her arc traces the slow erosion of love into entitlement, then into outright nihilism. This is where Eva fully leans into theatrical villainy, and it's a sight to behold. Tim Burton's world is exaggerated and deliberately artificial, and he's responsible for my favorite interpretation of Gotham City. Green understands what world she's become a part of. She plays Angelique like someone who knows she's in a gothic melodrama and decides to win it anyway. Her anger feels regal, almost bored, as if vengeance is simply the most logical response to rejection. Physically, she's extraordinary here. Every movement is deliberate, sensual without softness, seductive without warmth. Angelique isn't cartoonish because Green believes in her desires completely. She stares straight into the audience and says, "Forget about all that. I'm the captain now." Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven is an epic about faith, war, and political compromise during the Crusades, centered on Balian of Ibellin's reluctant rise as a leader in Jerusalem. Eva Green's Sibylla occupies a morally ambiguous space within the royal court, trapped between personal desire and political necessity. Initially positioned as a romantic counterpart to Balian, Sibylla's arc darkens as the realities of power assert themselves. She marries not out of belief or ambition, but as a means of containment, choosing stability over conviction, and ultimately makes decisions that sacrifice moral clarity for survival. This is the role people often forget to label as villainous, but it's, at least in my opinion, Green's most corrosive performance. Eva plays her as a woman who understands the machinery of power intimately and chooses personal survival over ethical certainty every single time. What's unsettling is how restrained the performance is. In the director's cut, she poisons her own son, ensuring he's none the wiser by singing to him as he lies on her lap one final time as the camera slowly pans away. From the moment she learns of his condition, there's no question about whether she's going to act, only the daunting reality that she'll have to carry on living afterward, to continue somehow, to have hope. She lets it sit behind her eyes, the pain, but also the resolve, knowing she's spared her bloodline a life of inevitable suffering. I still can't believe this was cut from the theatrical release. It was one of the first moments that made me truly appreciate a director's cut. Sibylla isn't really passionate about politics. She's resigned to them. And that resignation is what makes her dangerous. There's a constant sense that she's accepted the cost of her choices long before anyone else has. When she makes devastating decisions, Green doesn't reach for tears or overt anguish. She only truly breaks when she learns of Baldwin's fate. Everything else is treated as inevitability. That emotional containment makes the character feel morally vacant, even when she's acting out of love. It's a performance about quiet decay, about what happens when empathy erodes through fatigue. The last time I spoke about Casino Royale, the focus was on Mickelson's terrifying screen presence as Le Chiffre. He's great in the story, but he's a one-and-done in a much larger arc. A villain of the week who, at every turn, gets bested by Bond because he sees guys like him every other day. But today I want to focus on the one thing Bond didn't anticipate, something that would shake him to his core, and something he never really resolves across this entire string of movies. This entry hits the ground running. It resets James Bond as a blunt instrument learning the cost of emotional vulnerability, and Eva Green's Vesper Lind is the fulcrum of that transformation.
I'm the money.
Introduced as a Treasury agent assigned to monitor Bond, Vesper begins the film armored in intelligence and emotional distance. She has an answer for every one of Bond's advances. Not an easy task for someone who usually charms women into giving up information. I'd play clips from their first meeting, but we'd be here for 2 minutes. Honestly, this era of Bond films is where they absolutely nailed the dialogue, and that sharpness only strengthens her character. As the narrative moves through the poker tournament and the escalating violence, Vesper and Bond develop a genuine intimacy that briefly suggests the possibility of escape from espionage entirely, a desire Bond has been carrying long before we ever meet him. And for a moment, he's finally happy. The turning point comes when it's revealed that Vesper has been coerced into betraying Bond to protect someone she loves, reframing her actions not as malice, but desperation. That emotional spiral ends in her taking her own life, which becomes the defining trauma that seals Bond into emotional isolation.
Job's done. The bitch is dead.
Vesper permanently scars the franchise's protagonist. This is where Eva Green proves she doesn't need theatrics or overt malice to function as an antagonist. She layers the character with enough vulnerability to feel real, but never enough to feel safe. There's always something withheld, a pause held too long, a look that doesn't fully resolve. When the betrayal lands, it doesn't feel like a twist so much as a revelation of what was always there, a possibility that was simply too good to be true. Her guilt isn't performative. Her love for Bond doesn't absolve her. That's why Vesper lingers as one of the franchise's most effective antagonists. She doesn't oppose Bond physically or ideologically. She outmaneuvers him emotionally and pays the price for it. She does to him what he does to other women effortlessly. It's villainy rooted in intelligence, fear, and compromise, and Green sells every layer without ever begging for sympathy. In a Victorian London where Gothic horror myths intersect, Penny Dreadful follows a group of outsiders battling supernatural forces while confronting their own inner darkness. Eva Green's Vanessa Ives is the series' spiritual core, a woman haunted by demonic possession, religious guilt, and prophetic destiny. Across the show, Vanessa's arc oscillates between resistance and surrender. She seeks redemption through faith and companionship, yet remains drawn toward the very darkness she fears. With each season, the tension tightens, transforming her from an afflicted victim into a conscious participant in a cosmic struggle between good and evil. By the final season, Vanessa accepts that her existence itself destabilizes the world, leading her toward a sacrificial resolution. Her progression is one of tragic inevitability, the slow realization that survival and salvation are mutually exclusive. Vanessa Ives is the most complete expression of Eva Green's entire screen persona, and it's telling that she exists in a television space that allowed the character time to rot and metastasize. I love using that word, metastasize. She isn't a villain in the traditional sense, but she is absolutely the axis around which evil circulates. Green plays Vanessa as someone who understands that darkness is something you negotiate with daily. Green loves to fuse spiritual anguish with authority. Vanessa is devout, but not submissive. She believes in God, but she argues with him every day. Her possession scenes are philosophical confrontations. Green plays evil as recognition, as if some part of Vanessa already knows the demon's voice because it sounds uncomfortably close to her own. Physically, Green gives Vanessa an exhausting intensity. Her stillness feels coiled, like restraint itself is an act of violence. When she finally erupts, screaming, convulsing, commanding a room through sheer force of will, it never feels indulgent. It feels earned, like the release of pressure that's been building for decades. More importantly, Vanessa isn't framed as innocent corruption. She has agency in her damnation. She chooses resistance even when it destroys her, and that choice places her closer to tragic villain than victimized heroine. I get a lot of shit for the not just X but Y phrasing, but it fits here, because her performances are never just what's visible. There is always work happening beneath the surface, and that invisible effort is a big part of why they land the way they do. Penny Dreadful works because Green treats internal conflict as spectacle, and spectacle as something deeply private. And lastly, let's talk about Sin City, A Dame to Kill For. Set within Frank Miller's hyper-stylized noir universe, the film follows multiple intersecting stories of corruption and violence. Eva Green's Ava Lord is introduced as a mysterious woman seeking protection from her abusive husband, pulling Dwight McCarthy into her orbit almost immediately. As the plot unfolds, it becomes clear that Ava has orchestrated every event, using seduction and emotional manipulation to eliminate threats and secure control. It's easily her magnum opus when it comes to pure villainy. Each act peels back another layer of deception until there's nothing left to hide. I mean, she's just ruthless, calculating, predatory, and entirely self-serving. That brutality pairs perfectly with the film's stark black and white contrast. The green in her eyes cutting through the frame like a visual warning, the red of her lips weaponized as seduction. She's framed more like a force of evil than anything else. By the climax, Ava stops pretending to be a vulnerable woman waiting for a man pure of heart to save her from a tower. She asserts dominance openly, finally shows her true colors, and does it with pride.
When you're immune to me, I'll let you know.
That pride is what undoes her. The moment where manipulation gives way to exposure and resistance finally enters the picture. Her progression tracks the full life cycle of control: acquisition, exploitation, downfall. Ava Lord is Eva Green at her most unapologetically manipulative, and the performance works because she never tries to soften it or justify it. Ava perfectly utilizes seduction. She knows exactly what kind of men she's dealing with, and she knows they destroy themselves and anyone around them if it means believing they're loved. Green plays her with a clear understanding of desire as a weakness to be exploited, not something to be shared. That's what separates Ava from a standard femme fatale. There's no illusion of romance here, no tragic framing, just transaction. And crucially, Green never asks the audience to like her. She dares you to keep watching. The nudity, which could have easily collapsed into exploitation, becomes confrontational instead. She uses her body as part of the character's power structure, not as an offering, but as leverage. In the end, Ava isn't undone by emotion. She's undone by consequence. Green commits so completely that she becomes the only element in the film that feels deliberate rather than recycled. The one performance that cuts through the nostalgia and actually leaves a mark. Eva Green is the perfect embodiment of why I started this series, because she's simply too good at playing villains. She keeps getting cast as women, with agency, appetite, and consequence, because she knows how to carry all three without softening them for comfort. Her characters aren't evil for spectacle. They're wounded, self-aware, and decisive. They make choices and then live with the fallout. That alone separates her from most performances that get labeled iconic villain. Across these roles, the pattern is obvious. Eva Green doesn't play characters who wait to be acted upon. Artemisia doesn't react to war. She orchestrates it, bending the battlefield until she always comes out ahead. Vesper doesn't exist to decorate Bond's arc, but she permanently reshapes it simply by being part of it. Sibylla doesn't crumble under power. She survives it, at a devastating moral cost. And even when these characters lose, they lose on their own terms. Their downfalls aren't punishments for ambition. They're the price of control. That's why the villain label sticks. Audiences aren't used to women on screen who are allowed to want too much, know too much, or push too far without the narrative rushing in to humble them. Eva Green's performances demand attention. She understands that presence isn't about volume, and power isn't about likability. It's about conviction. And that's why, even when she's not technically the antagonist, she's almost always the most alive thing in the frame. And honestly, if that's what being typecast looks like, I'm not sure it's a curse. I'll take a career built on control, consequence, and characters who refuse to apologize for existing over another hollow protagonist any day. Alright, that's it for this one. Let me know your thoughts on her performances in the comments, and if there are any great villainous roles of hers I should have included, I'll take any excuse to watch more Eva. If you've been following the last few videos, you know I like to alternate between covering great performers and, well, not so great performers. But you're out of your mind if you think I'm spending my Christmas weekend watching someone like Jennifer Lopez for hours at a time. Nah. I'd rather cover someone who's been highly requested on this channel for a while. One of the very first actors I thought of when I started thinking about characters with a fuck ton of range. But then again, maybe I'm just looking for an excuse to watch End of Watch again. See you next week.